All right, good afternoon. And it is afternoon. I often record these first thing in the morning. Um, but with the vagaries of scheduling the last couple of days, it is now mid afternoon on a Thursday in the middle, towards the end of January 2025. And I'm going to talk about Walt Whitman, um, specifically his poem Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. It's a poem that I am um, thinking about how to use as the source text for a liturgical piece, a cantata, like a Bach cantata. Um, it's a very long poem. It's in 9 sections. Um, so it would be long enough as it is to set it, but I'm kind of seeing it as a framework where I'm wearing these mittens. My wife just knitted these fingerless mittens, and she literally just finished them yesterday. And although I've got a space heater in here, it is still very cold here in Pittsburgh and up here on the third floor in our drafty old house built in 1904, which is 120 years ago. It's quite cold up here. I could probably survive without these, but they're so cool. I thought I would wear them. So the text of the Whitman poem is the framework, but and like I say, even that would be quite long. It does break out into nice sections of soloist and choral sections. There's wonderful sections of lists. Whitman does this, right? He lists out different aphorisms in his poems. He literally creates lists of different types of people. There's a lot of agogic rhyming, right, where the first word of each line is the same. Like here, just as you feel when you look on the river, just as any of you is one of a living crowd, I was one of a crowd. Just as you are refreshed by the gladness of the river and the bright flow, I was refreshed. I can see this as a call and response between my soloist and my choir. Um, if I just scan through here now without even reading the poem to you, um, in section 2, every line begins with the word the impalpable substance, the similitudes, the glories strung like beads on my smallest sight. It's very good stuff. And then the second half of the second section, every line begins with the word others. Others will enter the gates. Others will watch the run. Others will see the shipping. Others will see the islands. Section 3, just as any of you, just as you are refreshed, just as you stand, just as you look. In that same third section, looked at the fine centrifugal spokes of light, looked on the haze, looked on the vapor, looked towards the lower. These are the beginnings of much longer lines. I too lived, I too walked, I too felt. Who was to know? Who knows but I am enjoying this? Who knows for all the distance? Right? Um, it provides a real structure to the poem. But here's the thing I really love about this poem is that I think it is actually a vortex in time. I think Walt Whitman, and I think I really mean this. I think Walt Whitman, in his poetry, and particularly in this poem, opens up a wormhole. And when he says in the beginning of the poem, right, so he's watching the ferry, and then he's on the ferry, but he starts, a flood tide below me. I see you face to face, clouds of the west, sun there, half an hour high. I see you also face to face. So he positions us in the time of day. It's dawn, early morning. Crowds of men and women attired in the usual costumes. How curious you are to me. On the ferry boats, the hundreds and hundreds of the cross returning home are more curious to me than you suppose. And you that shall cross from shore to shore years hence are more to me and more in my meditations than you might suppose. So yes, from a purely rhetorical, poetical position, he's addressing to me, to us, the reader today, and acknowledging that it could be hundreds of years in the future. But then he begins the second section. The impalpable sustenance of me from all things at all hours of the day, the simple, compact, well-joined scheme, myself disintegrated, everyone disintegrated, yet part of the scheme. I think what he's doing here, he's laying out a technology, a poetic technology. I read this poem, and I think about it, and I really do feel that Walt Whitman is coming through and is in front of me. And you will too if you read the poem, because it's a, I think technology is the right word. It's a mystical, poetic technique to introduce us through the imagery of Brooklyn and the ferry and the tides, using those images, but using the language of the poem to position us into this space where time has ended. Like the Messiaen Quartet for the end of time. Right? All of the experiences that he describes in the poem of his time there create this palpable, sensual touch that he is experiencing. And it's like a haptic game where we experience it as well. And I am convinced that he, Whitman, back writing this poem, is also experiencing me reading it, me wearing these mittens, me touching my face, me drinking a glass of water. And likewise for you, when you read this, I envision Whitman in this sort of this impalpable sustenance that he uses, the word that he's using there, this halo around him that he is uniquely familiar with, but all of us have as an aspect of our humanity. And with this poem, he is alerting us to that. He is accessing it for us, teaching us how to access it. And then we are, part of our being human is to have access to this piece that is timeless. Is it uniquely human, or is it a function of being alive in the cosmos? When I read this out loud, my dogs hear it. Are they experiencing the same thing? I think yes. I think when you listen to here, I'm just picking a section at random, but I think what it will show is this flood of experiences, like the flood of the water, that demonstrate the palpable aura of humanity around Whitman as an avatar, a shaman. Think of a better word. I can't think of one. Poet, capital P, poet. Like when Emerson talks about the poet. And Whitman knew that essay, of course. Whitman knew Emerson and considered himself the poet that the transcendentalists were waiting for. But he's more than that, right? So remember in the beginning, the simple, compact, well-joined scheme, myself disintegrated, everyone disintegrated, yet part of the scheme, the similitudes of the past and those of the future, the glories strung like beads on my smallest sights and hearings. And here, halfway through the poem, it is not upon you alone the dark patches fall. The dark threw its patches down upon me also. The best I had done seemed to me blank and suspicious. My great thoughts, as I supposed them, were they not in reality meager? Nor is it you alone who know what it is to be evil. I am he who knew what it was to be evil. I too knitted the old knot of contrariety, blabbed, blushed, resented, lied, stole, grudged, had guile, anger, lust, hot wishes I dared not speak, was wayward, vain, greedy, shallow, sly, cowardly, malignant, the wolf, the snake, the hog, not wanting in me, the cheating look, the frivolous word, the adulterous wish, not wanting, refusals, hates, postponements, meanness, laziness, none of these wanting, was one with the rest, the days and haps of the rest. And on, there is nothing preventing us from accessing the flow of this extratemporal experience of what it is to be human. With Whitman, an enormous generosity, accepting our foibles, accepting our flaws, looking for the glorious ecstasy, the glories strung like beads, our experiences, free from any reckoning. The palpable sensation of those sensations that we feel in our body, right? We see, we hear, we smell. And yet there is a mind that absorbs those senses, and that mind really does exist transcendentally. It exists outside of time, and we can access it. Whitman, in this poem, not just tells us that we can do that, not just tells us how, but actually instigates it, provokes that sensation. When I sit and read the entire poem, and I've just been jumping bits out here, I am no longer settled in the framework of my limited perception of who I am. The word who I am vanishes in the face of this poet, this poetry. And again, I think Whitman is feeling that also from there could be 1,000 people today reading this poem. There could be 10,000 people. There could be nobody right now, and tomorrow 50,000 people are reading this poem. And Whitman, in the extraordinary moment of his presence, is aware of all of that. And I wonder what that experience is like. You know, I think about the images of Whitman. I have a tattoo. Can I show it? Yeah, it's on my forearm. A tattoo of Whitman. Should have thought of this ahead of time. Where he's, it's a famous picture where he's sort of middle-aged. Here we go. Walt. And those eyes, those sort of heavy burdened eyes. So, read this poem. I'm going to read you the last few lines and then wrap it up. But like I say, I think one of my projects for I've started taking some notes. It will be more like a requiem, you know, in the sense like the Benjamin Britten War requiem, where the text of the requiem interjected with other poems. This is a liturgical piece, and I think it could sustain inserts and tangents and become a really pretty large piece of music if I can get around to it. You have waited, you always wait, you dumb, beautiful ministers. See, dumb as in speechless, beautiful ministers. We receive you with free sense at last, and are insatiate henceforward. I think this is him describing his sensation of experiencing our reading of this poem. Not you any more shall be able to foil us or withhold yourselves from us. We use you and do not cast you aside. We plant you permanently within us. We fathom you not. We love you. There is perfection in you also. You furnish your parts toward eternity. Great or small, you furnish your parts toward the soul. Not your soul, not a soul, the soul. It's a wonderful, wonderful poem. So keep your wits about you, and please let me know if you have questions or divergent readings of the poem or similar experiences with Whitman, and I will be back again soon.